Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our broadcast in 30 seconds.
Thank you all for joining me. I've asked Pennsylvanians to remain in their homes as much as possible to help slow the spread of COVID-19. And during the past few weeks, we've had great cooperation from Pennsylvanians who understand that staying home is not just about protecting themselves, it's about protecting everyone in the community. Of course, there are some Pennsylvanians who are eager to comply but are facing the stress of losing their home to eviction or foreclosure. Currently, evictions and foreclosures are suspended by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but that order will end Monday. No one should have to worry about losing their home during this health emergency. So today, I signed an executive order that will suspend foreclosures and evictions until July 10th. That's an additional 60 days from the end of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's order. This executive order takes one more burden off people who are struggling and gives them more time to get back on their feet. This act works hand in hand with other efforts to provide stable housing during this critical time. And that includes the relief provided by the Federal CARES Act to homeowners and renters of properties that are backed by by federal government. And it includes a halt to foreclosures and evictions by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, the PHFA. While the action I'm taking today delays foreclosures and evictions, rent and mortgage payments are still due. So if you don't make payments, you could be accruing back owed amounts as well as late penalties. So if you're having trouble making payments, I encourage you to contact your mortgage company or your landlord. And I ask those companies and those landlords to work with homeowners and renters during this difficult time for all of us. You can also find resources to help you online at the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, the United Way, and from HUD and other federal agencies. Homelessness is a serious threat to the welfare of all Pennsylvanians in good economic times, and it's especially tough during this pandemic. I'm using every opportunity available to provide stable shelter to every Pennsylvanian. The Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency is working with homeowners who are struggling due to economic hardship caused by COVID-19. And that includes offering forbearances with late fee waivers. The PHFA is also assisting renters by distributing information about tenant rights. It's working with landlords, property managers, to distribute and prominently post information about accessing social services, emergency food assistance, resources for legal advice, and more. And it's providing similar information on housing to homeowners and people experiencing homelessness. The Department of Human Services has activated the Commonwealth's Sheltering Task Force and is already working with local and state partners to coordinate resources for people without housing. And finally, the Department of Community and Economic Development, DCED, is issuing emergency solutions grants to assist communities with providing shelter to as many people as possible. These grants can be used for rapid rehousing of people experiencing homelessness, for street outreach, for homelessness prevention, and emergency shelter activities. DCED will be accepting applications for this program until June 1st, and we hope to get the funding into communities as quickly as possible. When Pennsylvanians know they have safe and secure housing, they can focus on doing their part to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. That includes staying home. Sheltering every Pennsylvanian that we can also helps increase the practice of virus-preventing hygiene. After all, it's much easier to regularly wash your hands if you have access to a sink. And as I've said many times, we need every Pennsylvanian working together if we want to come through this pandemic with the smallest negative effect on human life and our economy. So let's help each other. Let's help each other out with basic needs like shelter so we can all put as much effort as possible into combating COVID-19. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro has also been leading the work to help protect homeowners and renters. He's been doing a phenomenal job, and I thank him for his tremendous efforts, and I'm happy to invite him to join us from his home. Thank you, Attorney General Shapiro.
Well, thank you, Governor Wolf, and I want to commend you for taking this important step for millions of Pennsylvanians today. You and your administration truly are stepping up to make a difference, and we appreciate that. Look, the practical effect of the governor's order is to press pause on evictions and foreclosures until July 10th, at which time the normal process can resume. That means no evictions now. And it gives Pennsylvanians the peace of mind knowing that they can focus on caring for them and their loved ones and putting food on the table and taking care of other necessities without losing the roof over their head. Last month, my office negotiated with the Pennsylvania Apartment Association a clear recommendation to all landlords across Pennsylvania. Don't evict tenants until after they've had the opportunity to recover from this emergency. We negotiated this because we know that 1.7 million Pennsylvanians are out of work, and many more are losing a paycheck or having that paycheck slim down. And we know, based upon the governor's directives and common sense orders, that we need people to stay home in order to stay healthy. We know that it will take time for businesses to reopen, and we know that it will take time for expanded federal dollars for unemployment to reach individuals. And it's going to take time for our Commonwealth to fully open back up. That is why we and the governor and the Pennsylvania Apartment Association understand that we need to make sure people are protected and have a roof over their head. I've also asked the PAA to go a step further and extend grace periods for late payments and waive late fees for those impacted financially by the crisis and create payment plans for residents. Because as the governor indicated earlier, rent will still be due, but landlords need to work with individuals to make sure that that is going to be possible. I want to thank the PAA and I want to thank the governor for stepping up. This is one of the many steps that are being taken for consumers all across Pennsylvania. I want to briefly touch on two other things that can be helpful to those who are in need right now. Number one, we've published a rights and resources guide on my website in both English and Spanish, attorneygeneral.gov/COVID-19. It tells you what your rights are, and it gives you a whole host of resources, and it answers a lot of basic questions like, can my power be shut off? Can they turn off my broadband cable? The answer to both of those questions is no, while the governor's declaration is in place. There are many more answers, again, in English or Spanish, so please check it out. And second, we've negotiated a package of relief with more than 15 banks across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Being able to delay mortgage payments for 90 days or a car loan or other consumer loan for 90 days. Not being worried that the bank is going to ding your credit by reporting negative information to the credit reporting agencies. And of course, delays on foreclosures and auto repossessions and things like that. So I want to encourage you to look for those resources on my website and know that we in the Office of Attorney General are working our tails off every single day to make sure that we battle together, not just this public health crisis, but the economic crisis that has ensued. Governor, I want to thank you and your administration for your leadership. And with that, I know we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, General. Our first question is for Governor Wolf from Philadelphia's Morning Answer, and it's on reopening plans. Are you basing the reopening of the economy on whether or not the coronavirus is eradicated?
We're looking at a whole bunch of models. We're looking basically to see where we're flattening the curve of new cases. As you know, last week I announced the opening of 24 counties, and tomorrow I'm going to make another announcement to make sure that we announce the next round of openings.
Thank you. We have another question for you, Governor, on property tax from Penn Live. If the legislature sent you a bill imposing a freeze on school property tax rates for 2020-21, would you sign it? Why or why not?
Yeah, no, I don't. What I've seen of it, I don't like. I ran on property tax reform. We really need to reform our property tax system. We really need to figure out a better way to fund our public schools. This bill does not do that.
Thank you. We have a few questions for Attorney General Shapiro. They're all from KYW News, and or News Radio, and I'm gonna just give them to you sequentially so you have a chance to answer, and potentially if the governor wants to add to those. So the first one, will landlords be getting rent payments, perhaps through government funds, while tenants are being granted relief?
Was there another question, Bob? I'm
No,
happy to
I'm going to
answer
give
that
them to
one.
you, and I'm sorry, I probably misstated that. I'm going to give them to you one at a time so you have a chance to
Sure.
answer. Sorry.
Look, we recognize that landlords need to put food on the table as well. And that's why the governor and I have been very clear that, look, rent is still due and that landlords will work with you if you need some type of relief. The key here is making sure that an eviction cannot happen not only during this crisis, but in the weeks and months thereafter. I think it's important for landlords to recognize that there are federal resources potentially available to them through PPP. It's also important that if you bank at one of the 15 or so banks that we've negotiated with for relief, known as the Pennsylvania Care Package, that you can contact that bank right away if you're a landlord and get some relief through them. So those are two other avenues for relief.
The next question from KYW News Radio. Are landlords expected to forego payments for the duration of this coronavirus emergency?
Now, again, we want renters paying their rent and landlords being able to collect that. We recognize that there are going to be hardships for individuals with 1.7 million Pennsylvanians out of work, with people having their paychecks trimmed down. We recognize there's real hardship. And as the governor said many times, we are all in this together, and we've got to lean on one another. We've got to communicate with one another and work with one another. The order that the governor's put forth today, the package of consumer reliefs efforts that we've put forth, are part of the process to help all sides in that effort. I am confident that if we work together, we're going to beat this. I'm confident that if we heed the warnings from the public health experts and the governor and others to stay home, to wear a mask, to physically distance ourselves, while at the same time being able to meet people's economic needs and their financial needs, that we're going to get through this together and that we're going to come through this stronger.
As a follow-up to that, what about landlords who don't have mortgages but depend on rent payments for their daily living expenses?
Again, I would encourage you to look to some of the federal aid that has come through. I would encourage you to look to some of the other aid that's available through these financial institutions that are participating in the Pennsylvania Care Package.
We have another question for you, General, from the AP. Most rental properties are owned by small-time landlords. What would you say to a mom-and-pop landlord who still has to pay property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and in many cases, a mortgage?
Absolutely. Look, I recognize how challenging this time is. I know the governor does as well. And I also recognize that there is relief available to those landlords. For example, the utilities can't be shut off during this time. That's something that the PUC, my office, the Wolf administration has worked together to ensure. That's one example from the question that you asked. There are packages of relief. There is relief available, and we're happy to work with any landlord, with any tenant toward that aim.
Governor, anything to add on that? No, I think the Attorney General said everything that's really important. Again, this executive order does not relieve anybody of the obligation to pay their rent. If they can't, they will have to work with their landlord or their mortgage company to work out an arrangement. But the hope is that during this time, rent payments still come in to these mom and pop landlords. And when they don't come in, that they have a chance to sit down and talk with their tenants. But in any case, what this order does is says you cannot evict.
We have another question on homeowner and renter relief from WPXI. And I would think this is probably for the general, but maybe also for the governor. What's being offered in terms of relief for homeowners and renters? What's the legality of evictions and foreclosures right now? And what protections are in place to keep people in their homes, especially if they have lost their jobs to COVID-19 closures?
Well, and that's the point of this, and I'll let the Attorney General add on to this, but the point of this executive order is to say you cannot evict, you cannot foreclose during this time. We've added another 60 days to the the pause that has already been in place, imposed by the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. So this is an absolute protection against that eviction. We need people to stay home. We cannot be evicting people and defeat this virus. Attorney General Shapiro.
Yeah, the governor is absolutely correct. And again, I think it's important not to get too far into the legal weeds here, but assuming that the governor doesn't extend the order, this is the final order as it relates to evictions. On July 10th, that doesn't mean that folks who are going to be evicted get evicted. It means that the process begins. And under state law, there are weeks available in that process that will give people time to have a roof over their head even beyond the July 10th deadline. Look, again, here's the point. The governor has asked people to stay home. The governor has shuttered businesses, all in the name of public health, and it's working. What we can't have during this time are people losing those homes through eviction. And what the governor has done here today through this legal step is ensure that people will not be evicted, that people will have a roof over their head, and that they will have ample opportunity to get back up on their feet and be able to take care of themselves and their families.
Thank you. General, this question is for you from News Talk 104.1. Does the eviction stay order apply to businesses?
It would depend on the specific situation. Generally speaking, yes.
And if so, what is the guidance?
If there's a specific question as it relates to a specific business, we would be happy to work through that with them. But generally speaking, the eviction cannot occur. The process can't even begin to occur until July 10th.
Thank you. This question is from the Philadelphia Inquirer, perhaps for both of you. Should landlords and property owners charge late fees for tenants who can't pay because of a financial hardship as a result of the pandemic?
Let me just start, and then the Attorney General has a good answer too, but I think let's get back to why we're doing this. As the Attorney General said, the point of our effort to keep this virus from infecting more and more people is to stay home, stay in your shelter. So we're doing everything we can to make that possible by starting with disallowing evictions until the process doesn't restart until July 10th. But I think landlords and, again, mortgage companies, we're asking them to exercise real forbearance, recognize that we're all going through a tough patch here, everybody in Pennsylvania. And that basically says, if you're a landlord, we understand you're going through a tough time too, but so are your tenants. If you're a mortgage company, your mortgage holders, they're going through a tough time. Practice forbearance here. That's the decent human thing to do, and that's what we're asking you to do. Attorney General.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Governor. We have negotiated in the Attorney General's office a relief package with the Pennsylvania Apartment Association. That's the trade association for landlords across Pennsylvania. And while not binding, they joined with my office in urging all landlords to waive late fees and to make sure that they extend grace periods for late payments. The PAA understands how important it is for landlords to work with tenants. It makes good sense from both a public health perspective and an economic perspective.
This question is for both of you from Fox 43. Any guidance for people who rent or own vacation homes and rent them out right now? Can they do that? If not, what could happen if they do?
Well, I'm going to turn that over to the Attorney General. The guidance is if you're in a yellow county, you can do that. If you're in a red county, transit housing is much more tightly constrained. Again, we're trying to get to the point where people stay home, where we don't engage in situations where people can spread this virus. And so anything that anybody can do to support this effort, they ought to do. And so if keeping people from renting your apartment or your home or your vacation place for a time is helping in this effort, then they ought to forbear on renting their vacation apartment. Attorney General.
Yeah, not much more to add. Obviously, the governor's directives on the red, yellow, and green zones and how it relates to property rentals there That carries the day. The one thing I do want to mention is if you have previously tried to rent a property for a vacation, you tried to, book something for a vacation or a getaway or what have you before this pandemic occurred, we have put relief forward. We've put a package of relief forward for people to be able to get their money back, to be able to potentially delay that vacation, delay that getaway. So there's all kinds of information available on my website at attorneygeneral.gov/COVID-19. You do have rights to be able to get that money back if you've previously booked something for a vacation or some type of getaway.
Thank you. We're going to move on to some off-topic questions from WBRE and WYOU for the governor. What's your reaction to MART's bus resuming limited bus service to New York City and Philadelphia? MART's officials say they are taking safety measures and are gearing their service to first responders and healthcare workers who are traveling into the cities every day regardless.
I said yesterday the same thing I'll say today, and that is I think it's inappropriate. They're traveling from one danger zone to another, and I don't know exactly how you could possibly keep people safe.
Thank you. Another question for you, Governor, from WBRE and WYOU. The citizens of Wyoming County have showed frustration being categorized with the Northeast counties and feel they should move to the yellow phase earlier due to their lower number of cases. Will counties with low case counts that border hot zone counties still be able to open earlier than their neighboring counties?
Yeah, we're looking at each county on its own. We take into account the fact that they are surrounded by other counties. You can call that a region, but we don't have as I've said many times, we don't have a hard and fast definition of what a region is. We're looking to save people's lives. We're looking to keep people safe. And if you're in a county that is ready to open and go to the yellow zone, and we're convinced that in doing that, you're still a very good chance of keeping people safe, we will be moving to open you up, get you to the yellow zone as quickly as possible.
Thank you. We have another question on reopening from WPXI. Lawrence and Mercer counties are moving to the yellow phase tomorrow. Can car dealerships begin selling vehicles in person, and can daycares begin to open?
Yeah, in the yellow zone they can. Again, as we move into yellow zone and eventually as we move into the green zones, we're all battling the same enemy. It's the virus. It's not state government. It's not the federal government. It's not local government. It's the virus. And anything we can do to defeat that virus, we ought to do. So as we get to back into opening businesses and daycare centers, anything any of those centers can do to make their customers, their employees safe, that's going to help in this battle against this virus.
We have a question for Attorney General Shapiro from Pennsylvania Capital Star on gig workers. You recently worked out a deal with DoorDash to expand their protections for delivery workers, but some workplace activists say Pennsylvania state law as written could be used to make gig workers full employees. Do you agree with that interpretation, and how does it play in conversations with gig employers such as DoorDash?
We're pleased to be able to work out this deal with DoorDash and give their workers some added protection. The ability to be able to stay home if they're sick or a loved one is sick or they need to care for a child and still get paid. Being able to have access to telehealth. We were also pleased to be able to work with DoorDash to be able to deliver food for free to homebound low-income seniors in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We also think that this serves as a model for other gig workers and other gig companies, not just here in Pennsylvania, but all across the country. And of course, DoorDash, even though they negotiated the deal with me, the Pennsylvania Attorney General, they've agreed now to take these standards all across the country. So we think this sets a new bar for how gig workers ought to be treated during this pandemic. Now, the real question, I think this is what the Capital Star is getting at, is as we go forward, as we come out of this pandemic, how do we treat gig workers? And I think it's a particularly important question, particularly because 50% of our workforce in the next decade are going to be people who are technically independent contractors, and many of them are going to be working for one of these gig companies. We have got to treat them right, and we've got to have state laws and federal laws in place that recognize who they are and what they do, and not allow the big corporations to take advantage of them, to make sure that they get their full tips, to make sure that they get their full wages, to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of by corporate leadership somewhere else. This is going to be the work that the legislature, the governor, my office, and others are going to have to do as we come out of this crisis and begin to look at a workforce that is going to be newly formed, where 1.7 million Pennsylvanians who are hopefully going to go back to work may be going back into different jobs, into different sectors, and to environments that look quite different than they did before this pandemic struck. And that's going to be the work that's going to fall to all of us. But gig workers are among the most vulnerable in our workforce. They're oftentimes unprotected. We address that as it relates to DoorDash during this pandemic. Hopefully, other companies will follow suit. We're working with a number of their CEOs right now. But ultimately, we've got to answer this broader question about how we treat gig workers and how we make them full participants in our Pennsylvania economy.
Thank you, General. We have another question for you from Fox 43. Any update on the number of price gouging claims, and have you seen a decrease over the number of complaints each week over the past few weeks? Will any charges be filed, or will anyone face fines?
Sure. We have really not seen a slowdown in the number of tips we've received from Pennsylvanians. We are right at 5,000 tips received on price gouging since the governor's declaration in early March. We set up a special hotline, pricegouging@attorneygeneral.gov. And I want to encourage all Pennsylvanians to reach out to us if they think they see price gouging. We really only need 4 pieces of information. And what we need is the name of the product, the price of the product, the name of the store you're trying to buy from, and the location of the store. Doesn't matter whether it's on a street corner or whether it's online. We can go and combat price gouging. I can tell you that we have followed up on every single one of the tips that have come through. We have issued about 500 cease and desist letters, and we do that if the store refuses to comply with our request that they cut it out, right? That they go back to an appropriate price. Our next step is to issue a cease and desist letter. And then after that, if they refuse to comply, we have other avenues available to us. We can issue an AVC, as we did in Delaware County just yesterday with a store there, that includes a responsibility for them to comply with the pricing terms we set forth and the potential for a fine. The real news here, I think, even though we've had so many price gouging tips, is that the vast majority of merchants in Pennsylvania, they're doing the right thing by their fellow Pennsylvanians. They're charging a reasonable price. That goes for the retailers, the wholesalers, and the distributors. But make no mistake, when someone tries to take advantage of a Pennsylvanian during this crisis, we will hold them accountable. We will hold them accountable to the fullest extent that our civil laws allow or that our criminal laws allow.
Thank you, General. We have a question for Governor Wolf from CBS 21. Your administration has faced scrutiny for what some say is an apparent lack of transparency. You say you're trying to be as transparent as possible. So would you consider allowing reporters to attend press conferences and ask questions directly, not ahead of time, and ask follow-ups, all while practicing social distancing?
Yes, and I think we're working on that right now. We have tried to be accommodative of people's health, and the small rooms that we have typically used for press conferences are probably not as good as maybe a bigger space. So we'll be looking for bigger space. But in the meantime, maybe there's some other things we can do, and the communications department is actually working with press to figure out a way that maybe we can do that sooner rather than later.
Thank you. We have a question for you, Governor, from CBS 3. Now that you have okayed some counties to reopen tomorrow, the fear is that people waiting for PennDOT and its third-party testing sites to reopen will flock to those parts of the state to take their test, which may lead to COVID-19 spreading. How will PennDOT ensure newly reopened sites will be kept to standard? Will this likely put some of PennDOT's third-party partners that are in portions of the state that will remain closed at a disadvantage?
That's a good question. We will follow up on that. Again, our goal, as I said before, I'm making an announcement tomorrow as to more openings. So hopefully the pressure on those 24 counties will be relieved with the announcement tomorrow at some point in the not too distant future. But PennDOT will take every precaution to make sure that citizens using PennDOT facilities, wherever they are, and from wherever the folks come, that they do everything in their power to keep those people safe.
Thank you. We have one more question actually on evictions for Attorney General Shapiro from the Inquirer. When the moratorium will be eventually lifted, will there be an avalanche of eviction filings? Any plan to provide new funding for the courts to help them process all of these cases? PPE to avoid default judgments because renters showed up without a mask? Legal aid for renters to assert their rights?
Sure. As it relates to funding, that's within the governor and the legislature's bailiwick. They don't give me a checkbook in the Attorney General's office. But I can tell you that we don't anticipate a rush to conduct these evictions. We recognize that having this delay gives people the peace of mind that they're not going to lose a roof over their head during this crisis. And we also recognize that landlords, by and large, want to work with their tenants. It's actually not financially in their interest to go through an eviction proceeding if they're able to work something out with their tenants. And it's our hope that they will be able to do that. I do know, and I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer that asked this question just on the last point on legal aid. I do know that City Council, under the leadership of Councilwoman Gim and others, have passed legislation there to provide greater resources for those who are dealing with housing issues so that they have legal counsel. And my office certainly can help as well. So those are some steps that are available to people. It's our hope that there will not be this rush to the courthouse for evictions and that people will continue to work, landlord and tenants together, to come to a responsible resolution.
Thank you. We have a question from penwatch.org that we can start with Attorney General Shapiro and then go to Governor Wolf. So many parents and families are paying rent for apartments for college students who are not living at college. Will the state provide any relief to these families? What about families that signed leases for apartments in the fall with college uncertain in the future? Will these families be able to get out of leases if classes are only online in the fall?
Well, as for funding,
Legal question. Attorney General, it's up to you.
Sure. I'm sorry, I had a little audio issue there. We have had numerous conversations with students, for example, at Penn State and their families. We've received a number of complaints through our office about that. We're trying to mediate disputes around college campuses where these issues exist. As for funding, I'm going to defer to the governor, but I can tell you that these are issues that we are actively working on a case-by-case basis in the various college towns around Pennsylvania.
And let me just add, exactly, I think the college presidents like Penn State, Pitt, and colleges all around Pennsylvania recognize that they have a special responsibility to help their students and their students' families make it through this tough time. So I would be surprised if we don't have local folks doing the right thing by their tenants.
Thank you, Governor Wolf, and thank you, Attorney General Shapiro. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you for all the questions, reporters, and we will have a briefing with Health at 2 p.m. today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.